Success you carry your weight. There ain't no time to debate. You gotta push through life. All my life, I call it how I see it, just because you need it. All my life, every day and every night we gotta fight. Yeah, we gotta fight it. Fighting for success.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am very, very, very blessed to have this man in the studio today. I got to know him literally just the other day. I was at the OTC and saw this man walking around, and Lauren Burrows comes over, and she grabs my arm. She's like, "You need to know that guy. He's a cool guy. That guy's got every story. You need to talk to that guy." And just organically enough, he comes walking by, and Lauren introduces us, and we stand there and talk for quite some time. And just immediately, I knew that this man is someone that I wanted to sit down in the studio with and have some conversations about his knowledge, about his personal background in the sport of wrestling, about his mentality, his faith. It's just it's really, really cool to see someone that's kind of been at all aspects of the sport and in life. I'm sitting in the studio with Pastor Jose Campo. How you doing, buddy?
Fantastic.
Yeah, did I say your last name correct? Campo.
Campo in Spain, that's what they call it.
That's what I thought. Yeah, my wife she wants me to say Campo, but she's Hispanic. So, but yeah, so I met you the other day. I appreciate you coming in and sitting down with this, and I'm excited to see where this one goes. Each guy that sits in this seat, each girl that sits in this seat, we kind of just go on a journey. We kind of just let, whatever happens. And what I love about this is that it's a conversation, What I like to start off with, though, is give me your backstory. Where you from? What, where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? Let's go from there.
Well, I was blessed that I had two unbelievable parents. My dad was the greatest wrestling coach in the history of New York.
Really?
And as a little boy, I saw my father turn this little town in upstate New York that had never won before, and he turned them into an athletic powerhouse.
Wow. Yeah.
This small little town, he was the football and wrestling coach.
Okay.
And I would go to the football games, and I would see them carry my dad off the field on their shoulders.
Wow.
I had so many of his wrestlers tell me that my father was the greatest, most influential person in their life.
Wow.
And so as a little boy, when I heard that, I knew that I wanted to be a coach, just like my dad. Man, I couldn't wait to be called Coach Campo.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, we had 6 kids living in a 1-bedroom, no bath apartment.
Whoa.
We didn't have a bathroom. My dad had a toilet sticking out of the wall in his bedroom.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't have a bathtub. The only way, with 6 kids, can you imagine? And the only way we could take a bath is to ask the landlord if we could use her bathtub. So, but like I said, my dad turned this small little town around. In 1964, my brother and I are standing outside our apartment playing catch. Around the corner comes this sports car. I thought it was James Bond. This guy got out of the car. My brother and I run to the car and said, "What kind of car is that?"
Yeah.
He said, "That's a 1965 Corvette Stingray."
Ooh, yeah.
We said, "Well, how did you get it?" And he said, "I just graduated from West Point."
Oh, wow.
And when you graduate from there, they give you one. We said, "Really? Well, we're going to go to West Point." Well, the guy had a West Point yearbook in his hand and went and knocked on our apartment door. And engraved on the yearbook, it said, "Thanks, Coach. I couldn't have done it without you."
Wow.
My dad comes to the door and he hands my dad the yearbook. My dad saw the yearbook and I saw these tears of pride coming out of my dad that I had never seen before.
Mm.
And I made a promise to myself that I was going to do whatever I could to make my dad proud.
Wow.
So at a young age, my dad was my God.
Yeah.
I would do whatever he said I could do, whatever to do to become better.
Mm-hmm.
So as a little boy, I was at his practices. Starting at 3 years old, I would go wherever he was. I wanted to be around my dad. Our elementary school was always right near the high school.
Mm.
So I would walk to his school, go to his practice, and then come home with him.
Wow.
Went to every football game, every wrestling match. So like I said, I knew that I wanted to be a coach, just like my dad. So as a little boy, I was really good at athletics since I was around it all the time.
Right. You played them all? You played all the sports?
Football, wrestling, and baseball.
Okay.
Because I was in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And then in 1966, my dad wanted a better opportunity for our family.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved from this small town in upstate down to Long Island.
Wow.
Where there was bigger school, more opportunities. And still my dad changed this. Another high school turned it all around. Can you imagine? Head football and head wrestling coach.
Man, that's a lot of responsibility.
A lot of time away from the family. Right? So, and again, very, very successful. But it was very interesting because I go down there still in 8th grade, quarterback and captain of our undefeated football team. I pinned everybody I wrestled.
Wow.
And then after playing baseball for 8 years, I learned of this new sport called lacrosse. And in my first year, I was the MVP and leading scorer of the team. So then I couldn't wait to go to our high school because our athletic teams never lost. Our wrestling team never lost.
Really?
In football, from 7th grade to senior year, we only lost one football game.
Wow.
But the interesting thing is when I got there, I found out that the kids were not only as good as me, but some of them were better than me. So instead of me following my father's great champions, the lifestyle that they led, unfortunately, I started looking for shortcuts. It started in 9th grade. I went to a Spanish class, and I found out we were having a test, and I didn't study for it. And one of my friends said, "That's okay, Jose. I'll give you the answers to the test."
Okay.
So he gave me the answers. I got an A on the test. I didn't get caught. I go, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have to study, and I can still get A's. But what that did is that led to the next 8 years of my life of cheating on every test that I took.
Wow.
I wanted to be on the varsity in wrestling. My dad was the coach. Well, I weighed 115. So I said, well, I'll just wrestle 112.
Right.
But I couldn't make the lineup because our 112-pounder was the defending state champion.
Wow.
I said, well, I'll go down to 103. Well, I couldn't beat that guy. Our guy was the defending runner-up in the state.
My goodness.
So the only way that I could make the team was to lose 20 pounds and wrestle 98.
Wow.
And then I learned about this new diet that you could eat as much as you want and not gain a pound. You see, at 3 o'clock in the morning when my family was sleeping, I would go down to the refrigerator and I would eat as much as I could. And then I would go into the bathroom when my family was sleeping and stick my finger down my throat. And then I would puke out all the food that I had just eaten.
Yeah.
And see, I would puke until I could taste the acid from my stomach coming out.
My goodness.
Like many kids, I didn't understand that the choices that I was making had consequences.
Right, right.
I didn't know that the acid in your stomach could eat through metal. And the acid ate all the enamel off my teeth.
Oh, my gosh.
So now when I go to the dentist, it's at least $800.
Wow.
I puked so much in my junior year that I ruptured my trachea. They thought I was going to die. They had to rush me to the hospital. I lied and told my dad I got hit in the throat, but it was really from me vomiting all the time.
My goodness.
And on Saturday nights, I wouldn't vomit. Saturday nights, I would learn about laxatives. So on the X-Lax box, it would say take 1 to 2 pills. I would take 8 of them. And then I would clear out a path between my bedroom and the bathroom. And all Sunday, I would be on the toilet. Just so when I went to practice on Monday, I wasn't that far overweight. So instead of me focusing on getting better technically, my opponent was the scale. So I tell everyone I'm embarrassed to tell everyone that I was never a champion.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the son of the greatest coach ever, starting at 3 years old, going to practice all the time? I wasn't even a league champ.
Wow.
See, now I have an older brother. See, he was the champion of our family. He listened to everything that my dad said and did everything, and he was our champion.
Yeah. Yeah.
He ends up going to West Point and being the captain of the team.
Wow.
My dad was so proud of him.
Yeah.
Graduate from West Point. Well, remember what I said? I lived my life to please my dad.
Yeah.
So I thought since I wasn't successful on the athletic field or on the mats, maybe if I went to West Point, my dad would be proud of me.
Yeah.
So I cheat. I cheat on the SATs and get into West Point.
My goodness.
And next thing you know, once I got there, unfortunately, I was there for 3 years. I had 3 major surgeries on my body.
Really?
Yeah, I blew out my knee. I had a tumor on my rib. They found a tumor that when I was in 8th grade, I went to a wrestling camp in Pennsylvania, and the wrestling coaches all knew my dad. So after every session, they would wrestle with me.
Yeah.
Well, this one coach one day lateral dropped me so high, my feet almost hit the ceiling, and I landed on the mat, and I cracked some ribs.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was in 8th grade. By the time I got to be a sophomore in college, that crack grew into a tumor.
Oh, wow.
And I had to be sent down to Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. in the middle of the Vietnam War.
My goodness.
So I go walking in to this orthopedic ward, and this man's got his arms blown off. One arm, one leg, this and that. So I'm walking through thinking, I must be jacked up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
next thing you know, they had to take out one of my ribs. Luckily, thank God it was a benign tumor.
Yeah.
So I had that. And then my junior year, I had a bad shoulder. That I was a single leg guy.
Yeah.
And I was one of those guys that I'd shoot in, but I wouldn't let go of your leg.
Right.
So
right.
you would sprawl, and next thing you know, my shoulder would pop out. And we didn't do any weight training back then.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so, so I had 3 major surgeries, and the doctors at 19 come in and tell me, your athletic career is over. Your body's too messed up. You can't wrestle anymore.
Were you wrestling at West Point?
I was wrestling and playing lacrosse at West Point.
Both. Wow.
Because that's what my brother did.
Right. Were you having any success at West Point? I mean, you said you weren't a league champ at the high school level, but it's still kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I really wasn't, really wasn't having that much success. And like I said, it was very hard.
Oh, yeah, you're having all these surgeries.
Academically, we went to school 6 days a week. We carry 22 credits a semester.
My goodness. That's incredible.
We had to go to school on Saturday mornings.
Wow.
So to do that, to recover from the surgeries, So it was, and then in 1976, I was involved in the largest cheating scandal in the history of West Point.
Wow. How did that even start? Like, how did you get involved in something like that? Is it, did you know somebody? Did you get involved? How did that work?
Well, back then, you had no choice of what your major was.
Okay.
Everyone had the same, all 1,000 kids in your class had the same major, which was general engineering. So basically, We all took the same classes.
Okay.
The only choice you had is what foreign language that you wanted to take. So what they did is we were all taking an electronic engineering class, and they gave everyone in the whole class, 1,000 people, the same 10-page take-home quiz.
Wow.
Worth about less than 1% of your final grade.
Oh,
and
my
they
goodness.
gave you a week to do it. So what happened, half of the guys had to have the quiz in by Thursday. Well, we didn't have to have it in till Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So I went across the campus, found some of my friends that also cheated, and got the answers from them. Well, next thing you know, everyone turns it in, and one of the cadets writes at the bottom of the page, "I got help from another cadet." And see, if you help me, then we're both guilty of cheating.
Right.
And then if you know that I cheated and you don't turn me in, you get kicked out too.
Right. Wow.
So crazy story is that 100 guys they do similarities. They checked for similarities on a mathematical quiz, which with 1,000 people, I don't care if you got it right or you got it wrong,
Right.
you're going to find some similarity.
Right.
But I cheated. So they checked me and my roommate. They saw similarities. All of a sudden, they bring us up on charges. Well, the way that they do it, first they have cadets in the jury.
Oh, wow.
So you're brought in a trial, and your peers are in the jury.
Mm.
Well, I had a wrestling friend of mine in the jury. So all it took was one not guilty vote. So, of course, my friend says, not guilty. So I get off. I think I'm off. Well, then so what happened was 50 guys got found guilty. So now all of a sudden they go to a higher court, now with officers in the jury. And when you do that, you're allowed to get a lawyer. So now these guys get lawyers. They tell their story, and they start saying, more than 50 of us cheat here at West Point.
Wow.
So they came and they said, okay, we're going to blow it up so big that there's no way West Point's going to be able to throw out all these people. So they made a list of 350 cadets that they knew cheated. So I had 3 guys put my name down on their list. 2 of them I didn't even know. And one of the other guys that wrote my name down listed like 250 guys.
Oh, my goodness.
So next thing you know, we go in front of the officers, and they couldn't tell if my roommate got the answers from me, I got the answers from him.
Right.
And next thing you know, we get kicked out for cheating, 150 of us.
My goodness. 150.
Yeah. So now the toughest phone call I ever have to make is to call my dad.
Yeah. I was
Say,
going to ask how that
Hey,
was.
Dad, I got to come home. And he says, I don't understand. What are you talking about? I said, Dad, I just got kicked out for cheating. So the crazy thing about the story is that it gets blown up front page, the New York Times, national news, anything bad that ever happens at a service academy.
Yeah.
So the Department of Army starts doing an investigation, and they come back and say, yes, you guys cheated. You weren't supposed to do that. But West Point kind of screwed up to give 1,000 kids the same test. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, take-home test at that.
Take-home
Yeah.
test. So they say to us, they call me up, and they said, listen, if you want to come back for your senior year, you can do this. If not, you can leave without any military obligation. You see, at West Point, it's free to go to school there, and you have a 5-year military obligation after you graduate. But if you quit or get kicked out after your second year, then you owe 4 years in the service as a enlisted.
Right.
So I thought that I was going to have to serve 4 years, but they said you can either come back or you can leave without any kind of military obligation.
Wow.
95% 5% of the cadets I got kicked out, they all went back, graduated, had great military careers. So to them, this cheating scandal was nothing, just a
Right.
little bit thing. They paid their debt. But to me, here was my chance to be a coach. So I call up my brother, and the funny thing is my dad got all of his former military men that he knew and had them come over the house to try to convince me to go back. And it was a time that my dad and I grew even further apart because I hated it.
Right.
I wanted to be a coach.
Right.
So I went to West Point for the wrong reason.
Right.
They want career military officers.
That's right.
I wanted to be a coach.
Yeah.
So these coaches would come in and they would try to sit down, well, let's talk. And then I'd ask one question. I'd say, did you go to West Point? And they were in the Marines. They go, no. I go, well, then you don't know what the heck you're talking about.
That's right. Yeah.
And then my brother, who's now serving in the Army, calls up. And I said, man, Dad is bringing all these guys over the house to try to convince me to go back. And my brother said, here's your chance. You always wanted to be a coach. You got to do what you. So it was my brother that encouraged me to say, go ahead, here's the path that you always dreamed of.
Yeah.
And so quite frankly, my dad and I, grew apart. So with no courage, I run. I run as far away as I can. And I start my coaching career. I started at a small school in Connecticut. They knew my body was torn up, and one coach at a small Division II school called Southern Connecticut. They said, listen, we know you can't compete anymore, but boy, if you could be an assistant coach, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So for 2 years, I don't get paid. I'm running every practice.
Oh my goodness.
And the first year, our team had 28 wins and 3 losses. Only Oregon State that year had more wins than any other college team. The second year, we're New England champs. We qualify 7 out of 10 guys to the Division II Nationals. And the coach doesn't take me to the Nationals.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm not getting paid, running every practice. We're having success, and the coach doesn't take me. So my last year, Yale was right across the town in New Haven, Connecticut. So I said, if I'm not going to get paid, I might as well go to Yale, get it on my resume.
Yeah.
Luckily, all the coaches knew my dad. He saw what I was doing at Southern Connecticut. So I go over to Yale, and he says, we just happen to have an assistant coaching job for $1,200. And I'm like,
it's a lottery. Yeah.
So I coach at Yale. We were Ivy League champions. We had 3 guys go to the Nationals. Of course, the coach takes me there.
Yeah.
And I knew all along that I could be a successful coach. I knew that.
What made you think that? Watching your dad all those years?
Not only watching my dad, but one of the benefits of my dad is that I'd get to go to camps in colleges and things like this. So like in 1970, my dad took me to the NCAA tournament, my first NCAA tournament in 1970. You know what happened in 1970, right?
What refresh my memory here.
Well, Dan Gable was a senior at Iowa.
I know exactly what happened. Yeah.
And so I was able to witness him losing to Larry Owings at the
That's right. That was 70.
In 1970.
Wow.
So
you were there.
So I was there, 8th grade. Little 8th grader watched it.
Wow.
So it made a big impact. And Dan Gable was my hero,
Yeah, of course.
So I knew I knew I could make it fun too. See, my dad was strict and this and that. And so I knew what it felt like not to stand up on that championship podium. I was always second place.
Right.
So I knew, what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's almost as important as knowing what to do, right?
Exactly. Because, everyone wants to do Jordan Burroughs double legs, but they're not blessed with the speed, right? So like I said, I knew that I could make it fun too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it was dreadful for me.
That's interesting.
I knew the benefits of participating in wrestling was going to prepare kids forever.
Wow.
But you had to make it fun.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to make it fun. I was going to build relationships with the kids. And that's why I knew that that I could be successful.
That's cool.
Coaching.
That's cool. So all that you're finding your way into coaching. What, going back to like the wanting to make your dad happy, was that something that you just, because of who he was is that what it was, or is it because, did you feel there's an expectation on you? What drove you from a little kid to have that, like, because that's a lot of pressure from 3 on, and is that what you think pushed you to kind of cheat, is to take the shortcut to try to make dad happy? Like, where'd that stem from?
It was my dad. Like most successful coaches, he was very hard to please. If I won, I should have pinned the guy.
Gotcha.
In fact, one year, my dad had 3 state champions in a row, 112, 119, and 126. They win the states. He yelled at all 3 of them after they won.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
You didn't try to pin the guy.
Yeah.
So it was, you could always do better. You could always do better.
Wow.
So I, strive to do that, and I just couldn't reach that level.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure to carry.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I get into coaching. In the first 9 years of my coaching career, I was one of those win at all cost coach. Did you ever hear those guys?
Oh yeah.
I didn't care who I hurt as long as I won. So I thought that if I was successful, then my dad would be proud of me.
Even in the coaching, you're saying?
Even in the coaching.
So that was still the fire. Really?
Even in the coaching.
Wow.
So yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. Did you ever feel comfortable at home and happy doing the things you're doing, since you had all that pressure on you? Was it always just this almost expectation driven? Yeah, I mean, it seems like there'd be a lot of anxiety with all that. It didn't seem like it'd be much fun.
This was the reason why, after 40 years of coaching, I finally knew that I had to step aside. I had to, because I wasn't happy at the beginning of the season. I would go to tournaments and they would be unorganized, or I would look at the referees. So a lot of the things about the sport, that I was like a different person during the season.
Yeah.
And I could see that it was affecting my wife and my family.
Yeah.
That I finally had to say, it's time to hand it over to someone else. But
that makes sense. This sport teaches, part of the reason why we do this podcast is because I believe there's so many life principles that are in it. The good, obviously, that we go through and we learn certain things. And then there's also, like you said, there's some of these things that are bad that you can learn from as well. If I know this is a big question, but what has wrestling taught you through these years? As even coming up in a high school and stuff like that, you had those experiences. What things did you take away that helped you be the man that you are today?
Well, I call it my faith principle.
Okay.
When are we going to talk about me coming to the Lord? Or,
I want to know that whole story too. I want to know how those merged, when that was,
Well, it was so funny because I leave and I come to California.
Yeah.
Try to get away from my family.
One coast to the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where no one knew me.
Yeah.
And more importantly, no one knew all the bad things that I was doing. Because when I was at West Point, the doctor comes and tells me that I can't compete in athletics anymore.
Yeah.
I was an athlete all my life. That was like my thing.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you're saying you can't be an athlete?
Yeah.
So these hockey players come to me and they say, you want to go party? I didn't know what that meant.
Wow.
So with no courage, I had no courage, of course, and go, because I wanted to be known as an athlete.
Right.
I said, yeah, let's go. So around West Point, it's all trees and forests and stuff like that. So next thing you know, we're walking 15 minutes into the forest, and we stop, and they had planted some warm beer there. So there we are drinking warm beer. I hated the taste of beer.
Of course.
We're drinking warm beer, and then guys took out some weed.
Yeah.
And they started passing it around.
Yep.
So they come to me. Here was my big test.
Yeah.
What was I going to do? And I had no courage.
Right.
So in in high school, I was a straight arrow. I
Right.
would never, even though I cheated into this, but I never smoked anything
Yeah.
or tried hate beer. So next thing you know, I start smoking weed with these guys.
Yeah.
And that led to 11 years of drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it in that? It was just an escape for you.
I think it started with peer pressure.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of an escape.
Sure.
And then it was addicting. So people who say it's not addicting or it doesn't lead to other drugs,
Yeah.
they don't know what they're talking
Right.
about.
For sure.
Because it definitely was addicting. And, you come home from a long day or whatever. And
Yeah.
so it was a crazy, crazy time.
And this is the 11 years after West Point.
11 years, 11 years after West Point. And this is what happened. I go to San Diego. I go to California.
Yep.
And still trying to find a teaching job. And the crazy thing that happened, one of my dad's state champions, 3-time All-American at Iowa State. We both grew up Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to Iowa State and becomes a Christian.
Oh, wow.
He broke the world record for most push-ups in 30 minutes and did 1,400 push-ups in 30 minutes.
Wow. It's incredible.
He comes to San Diego and he says to me, I just was at your dad's house. I know he hasn't forgiven you, but I want to tell you that you have a Father up in heaven that is not mad at you, that he's got an unbelievable plan for your life, that if you just change your life and ask him to be your head coach, that your life would turn around.
Wow.
He was married at the time, and the doctors told him and his wife that his wife was physically unable to have children. Next thing you know, she gets pregnant.
Wow.
During the cesarean delivery of his son, the doctor pulls his son out and looks inside his wife and says, I don't know how this happened, but I want you to know you'll never have children again. And my buddy smiled and said, that's what you said the first time.
Wow.
They get pregnant again.
Nah.
So they have 2 boys.
Wow.
So I said, Bobby, his name is Bobby Antonacci.
Yeah.
How could this be, Bobby?
Yeah.
And Bobby says, we're Christians, and we pray to God, and we believe that nothing is impossible for God. So next thing you know, Bobby invites me to a Christian church, 1985. I grew up Catholic, so all of a sudden I go to this Christian church. They're playing cool music. They're laughing. There's pretty girls. But then the pastor gets up and tells the story that he was a high school wrestler in the state of Washington. I didn't know that pastors had previous lives. I mean,
yeah,
previous
right,
things,
of course.
Like their interests.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, I can't believe it. I said, I'm coming back. The next Sunday I go back, and the pastor's not there. So I'm disappointed. But the assistant pastor gets up and tells the story of 40 wrestlers for Christ.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? 2 weekends in a row, I come and they tell the story about Jesus in wrestling. So in 1985, that's when I asked Jesus Christ to turn my life around, be the head coach of my life.
Wow.
And then I knew I had to change the way that I coached.
Right.
I wanted to be different. I wanted to treat my wrestlers like they were my sons.
Wow.
I was going to tell them I loved them all the time.
Yeah.
You see, back in the 1960s, your dad didn't tell you he loved you.
Right.
So I said, I'm going to make it fun. There's more important things than getting your hand raised.
Yeah.
And I'm going to love these kids like they're mine. So that was my main emphasis, that we were going to train really hard. I was going to teach them how to be competitive. But I wanted to build a relationship with them, not just for the 4 years that I was with them, for the rest of their life.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm very happy now, the rewards of teaching, the rewards of coaching take about 8 to 10 years to sink in.
Yeah.
So now, at 67 years old, now I'm starting to get the rewards.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So on Father's Day, they'll text me or call me, hey, Coach, I was thinking about you today.
Yeah.
Or, hey, Coach, I'm getting married. Will you do my wedding?
That's cool.
Or, hey, Coach, my dad just died.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to me, life is about building relationships.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and I do that through the sport of wrestling.
Yeah.
So that's why that was my goal.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
when you got to San Diego and you found a teaching position, you started coaching pretty quickly?
You know what happened? Bobby Antonacci had a company because his mom died of heart attack. My dad had just gone through a quadruple bypass surgery.
Wow.
My dad was in shape. He didn't miss a day of school in 10 years. So I go walking into the hospital, see this incision from his neck all the way down to his belly button, see the scar where they took the vein out of his leg, all these machines coming, and I'm like, what the heck? And I learned that we have a family history of heart disease. His father, his grandfather. So now right away, I have a family history of heart disease. So I was teaching at school, but I was questioning, am I really making a difference
in
these kids' lives? So I get out of teaching for 4 years in work with Bobby Antonacci. We did health evaluations on 5,000 people. Looked at their diet, looked at their exercise, set them up on exercise program, teach them about, nutrition. So I did that for 4 years. And then finally I said, you know what, I got to get back into teaching and coaching.
Yeah.
And so after 4 years, I drove around. It was so funny because I become a Christian, and next thing you know, I get my first car. There I am at 30 years old.
Wow.
I get my first car.
Yeah.
I tell everyone I got a Mercedes.
Yeah.
But really, I got the cheapest car that Toyota made, Toyota Tercel.
There you go. Yeah.
Every day at 7:30, I would drive around San Diego looking for a school that needed a wrestling coach. At 7, I would listen for the first time ever. I would listen to a Christian radio station. And at 7:30 every morning, there was a show came on it's called Focus on the Family. And I would learn about people that had mistakes just like me, that God turned their life around. So that gave me the encouragement that God had a plan for my life. So I drive into this school that had palm trees on the school. They had 2 wrestling rooms.
Wow.
And they just happened to need a wrestling coach.
Oh, my goodness.
So I become a Christian. I get a car, and then I got a job. Man, I wanted a girlfriend. Bobby Antonacci calls me up and says, I just met this girl. She's athletic. She's real pretty. Man, you would love her. I said, okay, Bobby, here's the guy that led me to the Lord. Okay, Bobby. So I said, I'm going to take this girl out, and I'm going to take her to the nicest place and everything. So I take this girl out, and she was a jerk. I take her back to my apartment, and we're talking, and she was such a jerk. I walk to the front door of my apartment and open the door and tell her to leave, that she should leave. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
She's looking at me. She says, what? I said, you and I aren't alike. This ain't going to work out. And she's cursing at me, calling me all names as she's walking out. I go to get in bed, and I'd never had this before. I had a sheet of paper that I'd written out that said godliness plus contentment equals great gain. I was trying to lead a godly life.
Yeah.
I was content. I wasn't brokenhearted about this girl.
Right.
The very next day, I go to school, and the football coach is waiting for me at the front door. And he says, a fine-looking substitute teacher just walked in. Do you want to meet her? And I said, Coach, last night I had the worst blind date of my life. I said, that's okay. I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah.
He said, okay, But if you want to meet her, she's sitting right over there. So I look over and see her sitting at the table. And as a little boy growing up in New York, especially during wrestling season, can you imagine? I'd have no body fat on
Right.
me, and I would get so cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved watching the Rose Bowl.
Mm.
I would see the palm trees
Yeah.
at the Rose Bowl, and I saw a USC cheerleader. I saw these blonde-haired girls, and I said to myself,
That's it.
I'm going to go to California, and I'm going to meet a blonde-haired beach chick.
Yep. She sat there.
The girl that the coach was pointing out had short brown hair from Nebraska. So I said, thank you, coach.
That's not the one.
I'm looking for the blonde.
Yeah, right.
So I go to my class. I'm teaching in my class. 10 minutes later, 2 of my wrestlers come into class. And I go, the football coach is trying to set me up with some substitute teacher. And they said, Coach, we just skipped out of her class. I said, is she nice? They said, oh, she's real nice. I said, go talk to her for me.
Sit your boys.
They come back 5 minutes later. They said, oh, Coach, she loves wrestlers. Her brother was a wrestler.
Oh, man.
I said, really? I said, go tell her to call me. They come back 5 minutes later, and they said, Coach, she said you got to call her. I said, go get her telephone number for me.
Oh, my goodness.
So that girl's substitute teacher has been my wife for 32 years.
Wow.
When it came time to propose, see, I was scared that she wasn't going to want to marry me.
Mm.
So I had to put her in a situation where she couldn't say no.
Okay.
So we had a parent meeting right before the season with all the wrestlers and all the parents. And I went to one of my buddies and I said, do you think these kids had ever seen anyone propose before?
Oh, wow.
So I introduced my girlfriend at the time. She comes out in front of all the parents and the kids. And so I get down on my knees in front of them and propose to my girlfriend right there.
Oh, my goodness.
All the mothers are crying and got their checkbooks out. How much you need? So I had to put the pressure on her. And,
wow.
And it's just been the greatest blessing, you know. So it's been awesome.
How has wrestling affected your guys' you being a husband? Is it some of the principles or growing up in the home that you grew up in? How did you navigate all that? Because I mean, a lot of times we go, you get married and you don't really have any idea what you're doing. You watched people around you growing up that really weren't great at being husbands and wives, and you kind of model your life after that. It's an interesting thing, marriage.
It was, if we think the sport of wrestling is hard, which, we believe it's the hardest thing there is, being married, and I tell all the guys, we have 3 guys here at the camp this week are going to get married. 3 of them are going to in the next 2 months.
Wow.
So I had lunch with all 3 of them.
That's cool.
To talk to them and ask them questions. So luckily, my mom was the greatest coach's wife that there was.
Mm.
So my mom was able to teach my wife what to expect.
Right.
To understand that this is our ministry, not just coaching, but it's your ministry.
Right.
That my father would bring kids over our house all the time, and this is what I did. We had 9 different kids in our team spend time at our house. Some came for a night. Some came for a year.
Wow.
Because I would go home and tell my wife these sad stories of these kids that weren't blessed with great parents, and whether they had drug problems, parental problems. And my wife would always say, bring them home.
Wow.
Bring them home. And some burned us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. And so, so this is what we learned, that one of the things that I tried to do was make it a family. And hopefully we'll talk about my faith principle.
Please.
But it's about being a family, that it can't be a team. It can't be a program. It's got to be a family.
Yeah.
So that's and then number one, there's no safer place for little kids than in a wrestling room.
Right.
You saw Jordan's little kids running around the room and climbing ropes and doing this and that. So we loved having our girls in our wrestling room all the time.
Yeah.
we didn't have any boys in the family at the time, but they were all big brothers to my daughters. Crazy story. We get a phone call that one of our wrestlers' dads is dying of cancer. That if you want to see him, you need to come to the hospital right now.
Wow.
My wife and I go to the hospital. Here's this man that wasn't going to make it through the night. I never met anyone on their deathbed before, so I didn't know what to say. I'm crying.
Yeah.
So I say to him, what can I do to help you? And he says, Coach, you're closer to my son than anyone. Take care of my son.
Wow.
I said, Mr. Tezak, from now on, your son is now my son.
Wow.
I'm going to treat him like he's my son. So he goes to he's a little 103-pounder. Wanted to wrestle in college. Well, the lightest weight class was 118.
Yeah.
Colleges don't look at 3-pounders.
Right.
So he goes and finds this small school in Bismarck, North Dakota, called the University of Mary.
Yeah.
He says, Coach, I'm going to go to school there. So his dad dies, and when he's a freshman there, so after every one of my state meets, I would go and watch him at his NAIA Nationals.
Wow.
Junior year, he makes it to the finals, gets beat in the finals. Senior year, he's got to come back and wrestle the guy that beat him the year before. He takes him down 3 times in the third period, NAIA National Champion.
That's cool.
He wants to be a teacher and a coach back at our high school. So he moves back, stays at our house. Now he's our son. Student teaching at our school, and our principal was not a great guy. And he told me at the end of his student teaching that my son wasn't good enough to teach at our school.
Oh, man.
Heartbroken, right?
Sure.
He goes back to get his master's degree at the University of Mary in Bismarck. New Year's Eve, he goes to a party where they had a Murphy bed. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
So where you open up the closet and the whole bed comes down in one motion. My son lays down on the bed, and one of his friends thinks it would be funny to close him up in the bed.
Right.
My son's neck hits the wall. All of a sudden, he feels a tingling and paralysis in his arms and legs.
Oh, my gosh.
They call the ambulance. The ambulance comes in, and the paramedics think that it's just a bunch of college kids getting drunk on New Year's Eve. So my son says, hey, I'm hurt. The paramedic said, this is going to be the most expensive taxi ride you ever call. This is going to cost you $500. And my son says, I'm hurt.
Yeah.
Instead of them putting a neck brace in a backboard on an injury like that, they pick him up by the sheets of the Murphy bed. When they go to transfer him to the gurney, the sheets fall out of the guy, and my son falls on the ground. In the initial medical report, the paramedics report he can move his arms and legs. When they take him to the emergency room, the attending physician says he can't move his arms and legs. So my son's a quadriplegic. I get a phone call in San Diego about it. I jump on the next plane, fly out to Bismarck, and there I go, and there's the boy that I surfed with, played golf with, ran with, now son, quadriplegic.
Wow.
First thing he says is, Coach, what kind of woman would ever want to marry a guy in a wheelchair? Right, so now my son's a stud. My son works for Homeland Security in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
They'll strap him up to a canoe, and he's got little arm motion, and he'll try to get out in the water, do that. He plays and coaches wheelchair rugby.
Wow.
So my son is a stud. We rearrange our house. My wife goes to the construction company, puts a bedroom and a bathroom downstairs on the floor so he can get around my daughters, see him. So the lessons that my daughters and people saw with him being in a wheelchair here, and he had national champion.
That's incredible.
Son, he's a quadriplegic and stuff. So So like I said, crazy.
You think, I mean, that's just a wild story. I mean, have you ever had a conversation with him, like, when he was in that state? Obviously, I mean, he was a little guy told that he couldn't go to college wrestle. He defied the odds. He went to college. He was the smallest guy in the team. He makes the weight. He becomes, runner up to the national champion. Defies the odds. Did he rely on that mindset when he was going through all this stuff? I mean, I would have to think that was similar.
Yeah. He, I'm so proud of him because, he said to himself, "Listen, I can either lead a life where I'm saying, why me, or I can make the best of the situation. How can I make this better?
Wow.
What can I do?" And this is what he's done. He's just
incredible.
I'll tell you, when wrestlers get injured, he's the first, when he hears about it in the country, he's the first one to call.
Wow.
To say, hey, your life is not over, that there's still things that you can do. There was a foundation in San Diego. It's now called the Challenged Athletes Foundation. They raise money for people to keep active. They bought him a racing wheelchair.
Wow.
So he was able to, for the little amount of mobility that he had, that he was still out there trying to, make life better. You know what I mean? So he's been an unbelievable role model.
Sure.
And proponent that, yes, bad things, right? God did not promise an easy life.
Right.
He said you will go through tough
That's
times.
right.
So he's just a great example of that when these tough times happen, that how can we make it better? And so, it's just, we're so proud of it.
That's incredible. Incredible. We all can learn from that.
Yeah.
You had mentioned your principles as far as how you coach and things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's where your faith and wrestling kind of merged and became one. Can you kind of dive into a little bit of your philosophy and how, and obviously, hopefully we have a bunch of coaches and young people and dads and moms that listen to this podcast. I'm hoping what you're going to, your lessons can teach us how to be better for the people that we're coaching and leadership over. Yeah. Could you share some of that with me?
Sure. Remember, after the 9 years, I knew that I had to change the way that I coached.
Right.
So I studied the greatest champions, the greatest organizations, the companies that are, that most people like to work at. Being in San Diego, I studied the Navy SEALs.
Oh, wow.
They're probably the greatest organization, right?
Yeah.
No one takes credit for it.
Right.
When our country's in trouble, they're sending the
That's
Navy
it.
SEALs.
That's
right?
it.
So what I did is I wanted to come up with a philosophy that's something that I could live by, that I could coach by, that I could mold into my family. So what I did, I saw that like football teams, they come up with a different motto every year.
Yep.
I wanted one word to make it easy, that everyone knew that this was going to be how we lived our life. So I came up with one word, and that word is faith.
Okay.
Now the hard thing is to a lot of people, faith is a dirty
exactly.
5-letter word.
Yeah.
So what I tried to do is I tried to come up with an acrostic to make it easier to understand what that word faith is all about.
All right.
So the F in faith stands for family, right? So instead of that when God made this world, he made it for it to be in a family.
Yeah.
That we were all born into a family. That everyone on a team or an organization, they all have different gifts and talents from God.
Right.
That if we could all use those gifts and talents, then our family, our team, our organization is going to be successful.
Right.
So like you see football teams, a lot of times I've worked with football teams, and they say, well, the kicker's really not a football player. He's just a kicker. Well, when the game's on the line,
he's a football
they're
player.
going to need a football, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in a dual meet in wrestling, that everyone has a role, that some people have to pin. Some people got to go out. You can't get pinned.
Right, that's it.
So when everyone does their job, then the family is successful.
That's good.
So this is what I wanted to do. That can you imagine the greatest companies in our country that people want to work for? They treat you more
That's
like
true.
a family.
Absolutely.
And this is the great thing about USA Wrestling
Yeah.
is that everyone has their own job and they're a great family. That this is one of the reasons why we have the greatest wrestling team in the world.
Right.
That everyone does their job.
That's right.
Now, the hard thing is many people don't know what a real family is like, especially
that's correct.
now.
That's correct.
So family is the most overused term of any athletic program. Family, yeah.
Mm.
But see, what happens is then all of a sudden the devil or the enemy wants to throw in some selfishness.
That's right.
Now the parents think they know more than the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget my dad coaching in a football game, and we were behind at halftime, and a father yelled out, "What are you going to do now, Campo?" And my dad looked up and said to one of the managers, "You tell that guy I want to talk to him at halftime."
Wow.
So you can see that how selfishness, that one person can't make a team, but one person can destroy a team.
That's good.
So especially in college athletics, can you imagine the transfer portal?
Yeah.
There's thousands and thousands of athletes that get mad. Instead of them sticking through it and going through a tough time, they're saying, "I'm transferring."
Yeah.
And this is how, the family unit is really been destroyed. And this is what the enemy wants to do.
That is life too, right?
Exactly.
We give up, we move on, yeah.
Right? Prenuptial agreements,
Yep.
all these other things.
Yeah.
And this is what the enemy loves to
That's
do.
right.
So then the A in faith stands for having an attitude of gratitude, living a life of appreciation.
I love it.
That too many times we complain about what we don't have.
That's good.
Instead of thanking God for all the good things we have. The Bible says in James 1:17 that all the good things that we have in our life are a gift from God.
That's right.
Now, a lot of successful athletes don't like to hear that.
Right.
They say, "Wait a
I
second,
earned this."
I tried."
Yeah.
They pound their chest,
Yeah.
look at my name on the back.
Right.
But they don't understand who's given them the competitiveness,
That's
who's
right.
kept them injury-free and stuff like that. So we want to always teach being grateful, and that's the great thing about Penn State.
Yeah.
You hear their wrestlers talking about being grateful
That's right.
to be able to compete. We've never heard that before. Are you
Yeah, that's
kidding
right.
me?
Yeah.
That we get to go to practice instead of have to go.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I remind them of my son,
Yeah.
who would give anything to be out on the mats. That, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday, at the Little League World Series, the little boy fell out of that brain injury and stuff like that. So every day, 17,000 people die in car accidents every day.
I know.
So you didn't get there because you're a great driver.
Right.
We have wrong way drivers. We have drunk driver. We have all these things. So when you get to a place like that, that was a gift from God.
You're right. You're right.
So and then grateful people are happier people.
right.
They're healthier people.
Yep.
They live longer.
That's right.
So we have to remember that all the good things we have in our life are a gift from God.
That's good.
Right? So we have to teach that all the time, live in that life of appreciation.
Yeah. I truly believe in the ministry that I've been a part of. I have always said that gratitude is a superpower. It is like, when you understand the power of being thankful, it changes everything.
Amazing.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the scripture says that the gates of heaven are open with thanksgiving. Like, the gratitude is the key to the entry, right? Like, that's how we enter into the gates, right? And when we want to access the kingdom, it's with gratitude.
Amazing.
So good. So good.
And when I try to teach wrestlers and everyone that at night, when you put your head on the pillow, so I have a challenge to all listeners.
Yeah.
When you put your head on the pillow at night, I do what I call think and thank.
Oh, that's good.
Think back about all the things that chronologically happened that day.
Mm.
And thank God for it. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for giving me another day. Thank you for not taking any of my family,
Amen.
my friends.
Yeah.
Because one night, we're all going to get that phone call.
That's right.
So when that doesn't happen, I say, thank you, God. Prepare me for that day,
Right.
because it's going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
And then I go out through the day. Thank you for bringing me to the Olympic Training Center. thank you for the pastors that wrote the devotions that changed my life. Thank you for the Bible that gives me encouragement and wisdom. And so I go through the day of thanking God for all those little things.
So good.
Because God knows the big things you want. So when you thank him for the little things, he's going to bless you with the big things.
That's right.
He knows what you want.
It's good. It's good.
So this is what I try to teach. We got to teach having that a life of appreciation.
Yeah.
Now the I stands for industriousness.
Okay.
That means you have to work hard.
That's right. Yeah.
I've learned through the mistakes that I've made that there's no shortcuts in life.
Yeah.
You're not going to win the lottery. You're not going to go to the casinos and win it back big.
Yeah.
That God wants us to live a disciplined, obedient lifestyle. See, being around the Olympic wrestlers, see, that's what they do.
That's right.
They don't mess around with their nutrition. They are so focused with their nutrition. It's amazing. In their weight training and the way that they live their life, you need to live a disciplined, obedient lifestyle. That's what God wants us to do also. He wants us to have the discipline to wake up and talk to him. Can you imagine? The creator of the universe wants to talk to you.
It's wild.
So if we can wake up when it's quiet, and see, everyone wants to hear from God, but they got their headphones on, they got their radio blasted, and they go, I never hear from God.
Yeah.
But what I try to do, I try to wake up before the dog gets up, before my wife gets up, and then it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because God knows everything that we're going through.
That's right.
And that's when he loves to whisper and say, hey, do this. So again, living that disciplined lifestyle. Yeah. That's what wrestling really teaches you, right?
It is.
You're out there on the mat all by yourself. I mean, even your grandmother in the stands that doesn't know anything about wrestling, she can yell and tell you what to do, right? And to not get your hand raised. That's why so many people don't wrestle. It's too hard.
It is.
It's too hard for them. They make up all kinds of excuses.
Yeah.
But bottom line, it's just too hard.
That's right.
So back to that, you don't tell that the I in faith is that you have to, and this is why I wasn't successful, because I wasn't living that disciplined, obedient lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then the T in faith stands for two things. Number one, it stands for being a trusting friend.
Okay.
One of the hardest things in living in California is that everyone grew up in a different area. We're seeing New York. Those kids stayed there, so they are trusting friends. Bobby Antonacci was a trusting friend. That he had the courage to come and tell me that the drugs and the alcohol and the chasing women, you wonder why good things aren't happening to you.
That's right.
So when you find out, remember when you were young and you had your car, everyone was your friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Or if you had money,
that's it.
College kids, if they have money or a car, everyone's your friend.
Yeah.
But see, you find out who your real friends are when the tough times come. That's when your friends run out, but it's the real friends that run in when it's hard. So it's so important to not only have a trusting friend, but to be a trusting friend for someone else.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
But the T also stands for being truthful with yourself. See, I was great at fooling people.
Yeah.
There I was at West Point, and everyone said, oh, man, look at this guy. They came to my parents, you must be so proud of your son being at West Point. And see, I fooled everybody.
Yeah.
There I was smoking weed, cheating on all the tests, And there's a lot of people in our country that are great at fooling people.
Yeah, that's right.
We had a 7-time Tour de France bicycle winner.
Yeah.
That everyone thought, oh, he came back from cancer. Look at that.
Yeah.
Fooled everyone.
Right.
Back in the 70s and 80s, we had a comedian on TV that had the #1 TV show in the country.
Yep.
He fooled everybody.
Yep.
You can fool your parents. You can fool your coaches. You can't fool God.
No.
So you have to be truthful with yourself.
Yeah, it's good.
Then the H in faith stands for hope. You got to have hope. Hope is about the future.
That's right.
You have to believe that the creator there, that God is not mad at you. He loves you.
Yeah.
And that he's got a great plan for your life if you follow him.
Yeah.
Right? That our country is losing their hope.
Right. That's it.
And so we have to be proponents of hope. We have to tell our kids that, come on, if you do the right things and believe in God, that he's got a plan, that he's gonna bless you. He's gonna give you everything you ever dreamed of. I got 7 surfboards. Like I said, I had nothing growing up. And now I got a beautiful family. You know, I got a nice house in San Diego. It's the most beautiful place in the whole world. I love where I live. And so God has given me everything. So again, where you get hope is you get that through Jesus Christ. He's the one that's going to give you that hope.
Right.
Right. So, but like we said, the hard thing is that we have an enemy out there that wants to do just the opposite.
That's right.
He wants to destroy your dreams and divide your team. He wants to fill you with so much doubt in your life, hoping that it'll lead to depression.
Yeah.
He's going to deceive you, telling you that the little sins are not that bad. Come on, smoking weed in California is legal.
Right.
How can it be so bad for you? Right? Or looking at the pictures on your phone at night. Come on, man.
Yeah.
So he's going to deceive you, right? And then he's going to test you with the delays of God's answers. That when you don't get those answers to your prayers right away, he's going to say, come on, God, he's not going to answer your prayers.
Yeah.
Right? So the devil, so in wrestling, we scout out our opponents. We know their tendencies. But very little do we talk about the devil's tactics.
Right.
What he's going to try to do.
Right.
So when you know those tactics, then you know you're being attacked. And God is that great. Jesus is that head coach. That even though I did all these bad things, drugs for 11 years, did all this bad thing, he's saying, come on, man, you can do better.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's going to be better. Come on. So every day when I try to talk to him, when I thank him for all those things, when I learn more about him by reading the Bible, doing devotions. And this is the cool thing, is that I've been able to set up a mentoring program. So now I'll read the Bible, I'll do devotions, and then I'll think, who could benefit from hearing this? So I have a coach's mentoring program that I have 170 college and Olympic wrestling coaches that I send out encouraging messages, encouraging devotions, Bible tracts.
That's
and then
good.
I have over 150 college and Olympic wrestlers, because there's never been a time. I'm a historian.
That's what I say. You know the
I'm a
history.
historian in wrestling. And never before in the history of wrestling in our country has there been so many great Christian coaches and wrestlers. We had 10 coaches in the wrestling room yesterday. 9 were strong Christians.
Wow. That's incredible.
So if you look at our Olympic champions, they're all Christians.
Yeah.
So like I said, so now we have to take advantage of this,
Yep,
since we
that's it.
have Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Snyder, Thomas Gilman, all these great Christian wrestlers, Helen Maroulis, all these great Christians. So now we got to take advantage of this.
Yep.
And they have such influence over these college and high school kids. They have such influence. So when Jordan Burroughs, so it was so funny, Monday night, we're having Bible study. So when I come to camp, I'll have Bible studies every other night. And when I say, hey, fellas, we're having a Bible study tonight, how about coming? So before our team meets at the end of practice, I go to Kyle Snyder. Kyle, will you encourage these guys to come to the study?
Well,
He
that's
goes, of course. So all of a sudden we go get in a group at the end of practice. Kyle says, hey, I want y'all to come to Bible study. Man, we had 36.
Oh my
36
gosh.
at our Bible study last
That's
night.
awesome.
So like I said, one of the things that I try to do is to remind our great Olympic wrestlers how much influence they have.
That's right.
on these younger kids. It was so funny. Brandon Slay, Olympic champion Brandon Slay, said it's a trickle-down ministry, that when these guys, these great champions, talk about how God has changed their life. So like when Jordan Burroughs blew out his calf muscle and the doctor said there's no way that you can wrestle in 6 weeks, all of a sudden Jordan comes back and becomes a world champion.
Yep.
And they go, how did it happen, Jordan?
Yeah.
Win Magazine, one of the biggest headlines in the history of the magazine, Jordan said, I asked God for healing, and he said yes.
That's so
Can
good.
you imagine?
So good.
Thomas Gilman has a Liz Frank injury on his foot. 3 doctors told him that he couldn't go to the Olympics. He needed immediate surgery.
Wow.
He says, I can't. I'm going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, God heals Thomas's foot. He becomes a bronze medalist. Next thing you know, he wins the world championships and then tells everyone how God healed his foot.
It's crazy.
So like I said, God is making a move in the wrestling community.
Yeah.
That this is what our goal is through FCA Wrestling. See what happened. When I became a Christian, I learned through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes that when you get to heaven, God's not going to say, how many championships did you win?
Right.
I truly believe he's going to ask us 2 things. He's going to ask us, number 1, what did you do with the gifts and the talents that I gave?
That's right. Yep. I agree.
And number 2, what did you do with the people that I put into your life?
Amen.
So, and this is what I'm going. I tried to please my dad while my dad was alive. To his last year of his life, he lived in my house. You know, we would take him to church and stuff like that, you know. And then when he passed, I live my life to please my Heavenly Father.
Amen.
And that's what I try to do every day. And you know, when when it came time to retire, so I taught and coached for 40 years. And I saw so many teachers have no plan for the rest of their life.
Right.
And they had no reason to get up. And I said, I can't be like that. That I tried to think of the 2 things that I loved the most. I love God because he changed a knucklehead like me and gave me everything I ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
So I love God. And I love the sport of wrestling.
Yeah.
So I tried to think, how can I use those 2 things? And next thing you know, the fellowship and Carl Perry of FCA Wrestling came and said, hey, how about you just deal with coaches and wrestlers? Then Rich Bender, the president of USA Wrestling, he challenges our board to say, find a chaplain. We want a chaplain. And so my kids are out of the house.
Wow.
My wife says, hey, here's your chance.
That's incredible.
Can you imagine? I get to hang out and encourage the greatest wrestlers and coaches in the world. Mm-hmm. I can't believe here. I'll tell you a crazy story. 1994, I get voted the National Coach of the Year.
Mm.
Most of the coaches that win that award, their teams are state champions and stuff like that. Mine didn't even win the league.
Wow.
So I'm like, I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
How could this be? See, little did I know that God was going to use that little award to open up opportunities for me to go and speak at places. They say, oh, here's Jose Campo, National Coach of the Year. But now all of a sudden I'm able to go in and tell everyone how God changed my life.
Mm.
So when you work hard and make good lifestyle, when you work hard, usually good things are going to happen.
Right.
But when you work hard, plus you ask Jesus to be the head coach of your life, unexplainable things happen.
Right. That's
unexplainable things.
That's right.
So, if you look back at the way God has blessed me, it's unexplainable. How could that be?
You actually told me a story about how you got involved with FCA, I think it was, that you were kind of like, no, I don't want to do that. And then, could you share that story?
Sure. They asked me to speak at the California State Wrestling Championships. And Carl Perry, head of FCA Wrestling, was out there listening to me speak. So he liked my story, and he came up and he said, what are your plans after you retire? And I thought I was going to surf and play golf and get in shape.
Yep.
And he said, I want you to think about joining FCA and being, the California representative. Well, you see, when I became a Christian, can I go back and
please.
tell a story?
Please.
I become a Christian. I'm working in the phys ed department at our school, and there's a plaque on the wall for the basketball coach from the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Now, the coach was a Mormon, and I said, Coach, tell me about this plaque.
Yeah.
And he said, someone gave me 2 scholarships for the FCA camp, so I made 2 of my basketball players go to the camp, and they gave me a plaque. And he says, in fact, here's FCA's monthly magazine for you to check out. So I'm reading the magazine. In the magazine is an article about a high school wrestling coach up in Orange County, California, about an hour and a half north of me, that does Bible studies with their coach, with their wrestlers, and takes them to the camp. I'm going, wow, I never heard that before. That Friday, we go to a wrestling tournament, and I'm sitting in the stands during the tournament, and I look to the right of me, and here's the coach that they wrote the article on. So I said, hey, aren't you the guy that they wrote the article about? He said, yeah. He said, I didn't think anyone read that magazine. I said, I want to help out at the camps. Yeah. How can I do that? He said, yeah, we have a camp. So that was in 1992. So I was involved with FCA for 25 years, starting a huddle at my school, working at all their camps. I was like the coach's representative, that when FCA was building in Southern California, they would bring me in. Here was another chance for me to share my testimony and then talk about how, you could use FCA as part at your school and things like that. But what happened is, FCA we're missionaries.
That's right.
So we have to have people financially support us. So throughout those 25 years, we would meet young couples that were all fired up, to work for FCA. At the next function, they weren't there. So my wife and I said, hey, what happened to this couple? And they said, well, they didn't raise enough funds. So when Carl Perry asked me to work for FCA, I said, heck no. I fundraised for wrestling for 40 years. I don't want to fundraise now to be able to do the things that I want to do. So that was 3 years. So every Sunday, in 3 years, God changed my heart. My wife and I would walk out of a church service and I'd say to her, what do you think God's trying to tell us? And my wife says, I think he's telling you to go to FCA. I'm like, oh, man.
I want to hear that.
Right? So next thing you know, I retire from teaching, and then, I become, I start working for FCA, just wrestling. So it's so funny. Carl Perry calls up and says, hey, we're going on a missions trip to the Ukraine. You should come. And I said, Carl, I don't feel God calling me to the Ukraine. But if anything ever opens up at the Olympic Training Center, I'm your man. Next thing you know, USA Wrestling is having a training camp out in Oceanside, California, 30 minutes from my house. They call me up and they say, hey, do you want to be the chaplain at the training camp up there? I'm going, yes.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I meet Carl. I meet Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Snyder. All these unbelievable role models. See, growing up, my role model was Mickey Mantle. I'm a diehard Yankee fan. Mickey Mantle was my role model. Everyone wanted to be number 7.
Yep.
I played baseball in Little League. Everyone fought over number 7. Luckily, I had a wrestling background, so I usually wore number 7. See, but I didn't know that Mickey Mantle was an alcoholic and chased women and stuff like that. So when you ask young kids who their role models are, it's really scary to hear who the role models are.
Yeah.
And I want everyone to know that on the USA Wrestling team, we have unbelievable role models.
You're right.
That live, Jordan Burroughs, Kyle, like I said, all the guys on the team, they live the life of Christian. They're wrestlers for Christ.
That's right.
So they are definitely role models. So like I said, next I get to work there, and then God opens up more opportunities for me to come up here to Colorado Springs and then to go to different competitions. So I've been the chaplain for our USA Wrestling freestyle team for 5 years, and now it's just one of the greatest honor of my life. I can't believe God lets me do this. It's just
it's incredible,
unbelievable.
It's incredible.
So,
yeah, I love that. And you had said that you were there when Coach Perry had gotten hurt.
Yeah, Richard Perry. I go walking into the cafeteria at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California, and he's got these little avocados in his hands, and little small ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we grow them pretty big out in California.
Yeah.
So I said, Rich, I had never met him. Rich, you like avocados? He says, yeah. So the next day I show up with 6 of these big old honking avocados, and I see this smile on Rich's face that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, Rich gets injured
Yeah.
in a activity that the Marines was trying to set up for our wrestlers,
Yeah.
a hand-to-hand combat drill where Rich gets poked in the eye with this rod. His orbital bone is fractured. The fractures go 2.5 inches into his brain. He's paralyzed. They life flight him out to the hospital. You know, we were told we had doctors come in and tell us that his future, he'd probably never walk again. I mean, his future was so poor.
Yeah.
And then they flew out his 29-year-old wife, you know, with their little 4-month baby, and it was the future didn't look good.
Yeah.
But lucky for Rich, he is married to the most faithful woman that I probably ever met, Gina
Wow.
Perry. Her and I would sit in the room and listen to the different doctors, and then when they would leave, she would say, they don't know the power of God.
Wow.
And here most wives at that age,
Yeah, for sure.
would give up and think about, oh, it's terrible, and she would just encourage me and this and that. And so every day I would go up and spend time with her, and Rich is in a coma
Right.
at the time. So God again did a miraculous thing, and now Rich is coaching at the Penn RTC, and he's a role model, speaking, they're sharing their stories.
It's incredible.
In fact, Rich and Gina are at the women's training camp in Pennsylvania today.
Wow.
And she's going to share her story, share her testimony and things like that. And Rich is coming, and it's just amazing miracle, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's looking for miracles all the time.
Right.
And Richard Perry is a miracle story that we're hoping that she's going to write a book all about.
Oh, yeah,
but,
for sure.
But that just gave me an opportunity to witness to the wrestlers here. Right. And now, like I said, I get a chance to do this. So it's
That's
just
incredible.
Amazing.
You told me a story. It's like you were put in that position. Everybody else leaves. You're still there with the family. God knew the timing. You know, had you taken the opportunity to go overseas and do it, you may not have been there. It's just an incredible thing.
Yeah, it was so crazy the way God worked that out, and now we're very close, and again, just amazing how God works. You know, when you have that faith,
yeah,
right. And Rick Warren says faith is believing even when you don't see it.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Faith is obeying even when you don't understand.
That's
it.
right.
Faith is thanking God before it happens.
That's right.
See, if you thank him after, that's called gratitude.
That's right.
But faith is thanking him before.
Yeah.
And faith is trusting God even when the things don't work out.
That's right.
That he's got a better plan.
Yep.
You know, so many times things happen that we're wondering, how could God let my son get paralyzed?
Right.
How could God take my mom? My mom died of lung cancer. She was a smoker.
Right.
And she didn't understand that the cigarette companies put things in the cigarettes to make it almost impossible to quit smoking.
That's right. Yep.
So I had to see my mom lose all of her hair. I had to carry my mom's casket down the church that she grew up in.
Yeah.
The church that she got married in.
Yeah.
My mom was an angel. My dad was really hard to please. My dad, he was our football coach, and man, he said some hurtful things to me that, wait till you see the videos today. You were terrible.
Right. Yeah.
And my mom would pull me on the side and say, you were born to be a coach.
Wow.
So my mom was just an angel. So when she passed from cancer, my dad was mad at God.
Oh,
How
sure.
could you do such a thing? You know what I mean? So, but like I said, we've just learned through all the different situations in our life that God is not mad at us.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought he was a cop.
Right.
I thought he just made a list of all the things. So when I didn't win in wrestling, I thought, well, God must not love me.
Right.
And we hear it all the time. God loves you. People don't. If people really understood how much God does love us, they would have so much encouragement for the future.
Yeah.
But they just think, I've either done too many bad things, or there's no way that God can love a guy like me. You know what I mean? But and this is why I go around sharing my story.
Yeah.
Number one, I want people to learn from my mistakes.
Yep. Right.
You always hear it's good to learn from mistakes or your own mistakes. See, it's even better to learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right? So this is what I do. I share my story so people will learn from my mistakes. Now, here's the hard thing. I've had 9 of my wrestlers die of drug and alcohol problems before the age of 30.
Wow.
And the hardest part about coaching is not the long hours on the weekend and stuff like that. You see, the hardest part about coaching is showing up at their funeral.
Oh, man.
And when the parents come and say, Coach, you are closer to my son than anyone. Will you speak at his funeral?
Yeah.
I've had to do that 9 times. So again, I share my stories so people will learn. I've had to live my life of regret.
Right.
I'm embarrassed when I tell my story that I was never, can you imagine I'm around the greatest wrestlers in the world trying to tell them how to be a champion.
Right.
I won the Farmingdale Christmas tournament. That was my claim to fame as a sophomore. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to have them learn from my mistakes.
That's good.
That and the second thing is that your choices have consequences.
Yep.
Too many times kids don't think of the consequences before they make the choice that they make.
Right.
Now, there's good consequences that if you work really hard, practice your shots all the time, you're going to have a good single leg takedown if you practice it every day.
Yeah.
Right? If you brush your teeth and floss all the time, you're not going to have cavities. You're not going to have these dental bills that I have.
Right.
So your choices have consequences.
That's true.
Right? And the last thing I try to tell them is that we serve an amazing God.
Amen. It's good.
He loves us.
Yeah.
And that if you can ask him to be the head coach of your life, he's the greatest coach ever. If you can ask him to be the head coach of your life, and all you have to do is obey. All you have to do is do what he says.
That's right.
Right? That if you do that, he will give you everything you need. He knows the dreams in your heart. In fact, he put them in your heart.
That's right.
He knows what you want.
That's right.
So if we can do that, be grateful, thank him for the little things that you're going to live a blessed life.
That's good.
And if he could do it for a knucklehead like me, he could do it for anybody.
That's
He
good.
can do it for anybody. So.
That's good. I just have a couple closing questions here.
Yep.
One, what is your life verse? What's your go-to verse?
My life verse is 1 Timothy 1:15 and 16, that Jesus came to this world to save sinners, and I was the worst of them all. See, that's how I saw myself,
Right.
that I was the worst of them all.
Mm.
And then in verse 16, it says that God used his great patience to use me as an example of his great love.
Amen.
So I love 1 Timothy. Yeah, it was a great one.
That's a good one for sure. If you had, this is a more of a, it's personal to you, each person, but if you had to define success, what would you say success is?
I think success is having that inner feeling, knowing that you did everything you could to be successful, that you use those gifts. So many times I see these wrestlers, I see them in practice, and they got all these moves, and then all of a sudden it comes to the match, and they don't do their move.
Right.
So it's kind of like you're not using those gifts and talents that God has given you. So I would say that was one of probably the main things. So
yeah. And I know you're a historian of wrestling in general. If you had to put a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, it's a tough one. USA wrestlers. I know it's tough to put you on the spot because you're close to all of them,
Wow.
but it's just kind of curious of what you see as the top guys there or girls.
Yeah. Dan Gable.
Yeah.
No one ever worked him. The disciplined lifestyle that he talked about. He would, when I went to the tournament in 1970, instead of him warming up and bridging, loosen up his neck and bridging on the mat, he was doing it on the cement. He would carry his books on a belt. And as he was walking to class, he would be practicing his shots on his book out in front of him. So Dan, and I'm a big Dan Gable fan.
Absolutely.
So Dan Gable, John Smith taught us that technique is so important. The first time I saw John Smith in clothes, I said, no way, he's a 6-time world. Are you kidding me? But he showed that technique.
That's right.
Right. That again, look at they each use their different gifts and talents given to them.
That's right.
But John Smith taught me about how important technique was.
Yeah.
Kyle Snyder. I've never met a faith-filled person. Kyle doesn't care who he wrestles. He doesn't care. He wants to win. He's so competitive, but he's not devastated when he doesn't win.
Right.
And he's 26. I've known him for 5 years. I've never met such a faith-filled person.
Yeah.
Grateful.
Yeah.
I send him encouraging messages, and he's always so grateful. So, and he's got so much more time to go.
Yeah.
Jordan Burroughs is the most amazing person I think I've ever met. What he's done for the sport of wrestling.
Yeah.
I think he saved our sport.
I agree.
But the amazing thing is that him and Lauren, they have their family in the public, so they know everyone knows what's
That's
happening.
right.
And we've had great wrestlers. Dan gave all these great wrestlers, but none of them have done what Jordan Burroughs has done.
That's right.
Talk about use the gifts and talents. He's what a great representative of the sport of wrestling. During the Olympics, he was the commentary, did an unbelievable job. I mean, he's a spokesman for different companies. I mean, he's always thinking about the future. I wish you could see it. You've probably seen him, but around people, when we're training in other countries, all these people want to come. All they want to do is see JB.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you ever see him with a picture with other people, he's smiling all the time.
Yeah.
We were at the dual meet in the ballpark in the Texas baseball stadium. We were supposed to wrestle Iran. Iran pulled out. We were wrestling all-stars from other countries. Well, we were warming up on the mat, and all these there must have been 75 little boys from a wrestling club. And they were sitting next to the mat just with their eyes fixed on Jordan. Jordan gets done with his warm-ups, puts his sweats back on, and walks right over to the center of these 75 kids, signing them and things like that.
He's incredible.
Incredible. What an amazing, amazing man.
Yeah.
The women, they also have great role models. The great role models, they work so hard, the women, to be accepted for what they do. And it's the fastest growing sport in our country. Yeah. So the women that we have,
incredible.
Adeline and Helen and all our team is great. And the great thing is all the Olympic coaches are Christians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terry Steiner, Bill Zadig, Joe Russell. You can go down the line, so you can see that there. To me, there's no such thing as a coincidence.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have a leader like Rich Bender, all of a sudden you look at all the coaches at USA Wrestling and the effect that they have of bringing in chaplains to have Bible studies, to be mentors. You can see why our sport is so successful.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing. Like I said, no coincidence that our wrestlers are great. So to say who's on the best wrestlers, it's
hard.
It's very hard. I don't want to hurt anyone's
No,
feelings.
there's so many. You go on and on.
You think of Cale Sanders.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I love Penn State.
Yeah.
I love the coaching staff there. I love what the wrestlers do. Thomas Gilman, he went from Iowa where, he didn't win the Nationals. So a lot of times if you don't win the NCAA title at Iowa, you're a failure.
Right.
And he was kind of an angry Hawkeye. I call him an angry Hawkeye.
There's a lot of those.
And then looks what happened. I call it a transformation.
Yeah.
He comes to Penn State, goes to the rivals. Can you imagine?
Wow, yeah.
All of a sudden he's around Kyle Snyder, all these great Christian coaches, Casey Cunningham, all these, and Cale Sanderson has great, what a philosophy. And so now all of a sudden he's become a strong Christian and things like this. So, Cale Sanderson, are you committing?
Right. Yeah. Incredible.
Kyle Dake, 4 NCAA titles at 4 different weight classes.
Incredible.
Are you kidding me? That'll never be done,
right.
The way he did it, So
it's a hard question.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew for you for sure because being the historian and being around them all.
Yeah.
But I just kind of wanted your insight, for a few of them, like we could probably put 100 on that list.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. No doubt.
Even another little list, a short list, if you could tell me somebody, whether it be a wrestler, it'd be a coach, it'd be someone that's used wrestling or coaching and went on to the business world, but someone that can sit in that chair and help people of all ages in the sport, out of the sport, grow. And I could interview them. Who would you say would be who you challenging to put in that seat?
Brandon Slay.
Yeah.
Olympic champion from Texas, first one ever. Unbelievable. Went to the Wharton School of Business at UPenn, one of the most prestigious degrees in the world.
Yeah.
Went to Dallas Seminary.
Yeah.
And now, he's built a regional training center at the Penn RTC.
Yeah.
That is unlike anyone in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That he scouts out who he wants.
Building a culture.
Unbelievable. Not only for the wrestler but for their families.
That's right. Yep.
Bible studies, takes them on retreats,
So
talks about marital problems,
Yeah.
does premarital counseling. Amazing person. My roommate here at the training center this week, Nate Carr.
Oh yeah, great man.
Olympic medalist, 3-time NCAA champion. Former pastor.
Yeah.
And now he's helping out the program at Iowa State, his son's national champ.
Yeah.
So Nate would be unbelievable. So
That's good. I like
those guys would definitely 2 guys, and there's
again the list could go on.
The list could go on.
Yeah.
But like I said, especially those 2 guys. Just since I've been around them a lot, you know what I mean. So it's it's great.
I let them know that Pastor put the word out that he's been challenged to the couch. So I in the podcast always I feel like one of the gifts the Lord has given me is a bit of discernment, and He gives me discernment. I tell people all the time, I can read your bad mail, but God wants you to give you the good mail and encouragement. And so I like to speak over my guests whenever we're about to end the thing. And obviously we just met, but I just want to tell you what the Lord has impressed upon me. He gave me the word that you're like, at one point in your life, you were like Jacob, right? That you were running. You're the man that ran from your calling. You ran, you stole your blessings, and you ran and you ran and you ran and you ran and you ran. but that you had that moment where you wrestled with God and that he changed your name. And when he changed your name, just like he changed Jacob's name, he made you a father of groups. And then that group happens to be the group of wrestling. And that you are seeing the nations to be born under that leadership. And that God has placed you in as many people's hearts as the Father. And that will raise up cities and nations under him because of your willingness to stand in the place that he's called you to. That people look to you not only for leadership, but also for that comfort, support of a dad. And that, again, going back to your childhood, that I want to make my dad proud. There's now you have given a different standard for these men and these women and these people that you've touched, that they want to make you proud, but by being proud of the right things. They want you to see the faith. They want you, when they're around you, they're challenged to be better people. And I thank you for that. I thank you that you are being a trailblazer, that you're pushing forward in a world that could be, it is a hard world. It's an underground world. We're our own little culture down here, but you're blazing a path that many will follow. And me personally, I want to be more like you. I've been in ministry for 20 years, and ministry's tough. But I want to live the way you live. I want to live in full faith, walking down that path and walking into my calling and being strong for other people. I see that in you. I recognize it, and I just want to say that your Father is proud of you. I love you, man. I appreciate you, and thank you for doing this podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor. Appreciate it.
Awesome, brother. Thank you.
God bless you, man.
You too.